Hey everyone, so we just want to welcome Jane to the Bari Chronicles. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a little while coming. I think we had to put off the last one, and then I went into hospital. So
thank you for being patient with us, Jane.
Thank you for being patient.
And you're welcome.
So would you like to just start by telling us about yourself, but also how you actually got into the bariatric surgery side of dietetics?
So yes, well, who am I? A bit about me. My name is Jane Stoltze. I'm an accredited practicing dietitian. Also, in the US it's called an RD. And online, I'm the bariatric nutrition coach. So people may have seen me on Instagram, and I have YouTube, and I have my own podcast. So it's really interesting to be on the other side of not, chatting to people with my own podcast. It's really enjoyable. The path. How did I become involved in deciding really to specialise? That's how I think about it in the area of bariatrics. When I went through university, which is a long time ago, in the 80s, the 80s, well, started in the late 80s and then into the 90s. Gosh, I'm aging myself. There were no real, you didn't really specialise as a dietitian other than sports or paediatrics. Other than that, there weren't really any specialties. So I've done a range of different things as a dietitian. I worked at the UK, liver transplant. I worked with the Royal Flying Doctors in child nutrition, paediatric nutrition. So I've done a whole range of things. And over my career, bariatrics has kind of been growing, and the whole area of bariatrics has been growing. And I had an interest for a long time before I really had the opportunity to specialise. And it came about, I had a child, and I was doing my own kind of bariatric own practice as a generalist dietitian. And I got the opportunity. I'd already seen procedures actually happening. Like, I'd actually been in theatre and watched procedures. Wow. But I met a dietitian that needed some support. And at that time also, which was really great, was that the Dietitians Association had some specialist training. So I did those courses. I started covering for this bariatric dietitian, and then she left and I took over the practice in a bariatric centre, and that was nearly 8 years ago. So it was definitely an interest for some time. And what really attracted me was the kind of clinical side of supplementation and pathology and kind of correcting people's levels, as well as the behaviour change. So I loved that combination. And it's just such a significant thing for people to do, and, people need support. So I also do enjoy that I just don't see people once and off you go. In some settings in hospital, I love the relationship I build with my clients, and I work with people long term, and just even keep in touch with people after they finish working with me. And people even, kind of contact me 3-4 years after working with me, like, Jane, I need a top up. I need to visit you again. And so I really enjoy that aspect to it. So there's probably quite a few different reasons why I chose the specialty, but I love it. So that's kind of where I am now, nearly 8 years ago.
That's the main thing, is loving what you do.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think it's great when people find something that they're passionate about. And so with bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, whatever we want to call it, most of us have to go through the pre-op stage and then the post-op stages. And something that we get asked about all the time, and I struggled with it, was puree.
So when we wanted to, or when we knew that we wanted to do this podcast with Jane, we thought for our listeners that we would do a podcast that specialises in the area of puree. And I didn't gag when I said it, so I'm quite proud.
I have said so many times over the years when I'm talking to my clients, patients about puree, I say it's no one's favourite stage, or very few. You know, some people don't mind and go whatever, but most people, it's not your favourite stage, but it's not forever. And, you know, and there's a reason why we ask our patients to go through the dietary stages after having surgery.
So could we talk about that first, because that seems like a really great way to frame this whole conversation is why.
Why? Good.
Why?
Good. Why? And I'll first say that I have clients all over the world and hear all different guidelines. So when I'm kind of talking about things, it's quite general, not just kind of what's done in Australia or what's done at your bariatric centre, but there are general guidelines, and puree is a really standard dietary stage that's really commonly recommended as part of the dietary stages, you know, across the world. It's not just in Australia, or not just in Australia and the US, it's really standard. So yes, you know, there is this journey, and I've never used the word journey so much until I specialise in bariatrics, because it is a journey. You know, the pre-surgery stage, and then you have surgery, and then you're walking and sipping enough to be released from hospital, and sometimes it's really quick and other people have to stay a bit longer. Yes, very exciting to go home. The reason why we ask you to do the dietary stages after your bariatric surgery is all about building up intake of fluid first, and I'll get to that, and then protein in a lovely, gentle way that doesn't aggravate your gut, your stomach, your bowel. So when you have your bariatric surgery, there is incisions. There's a lot of poking and prodding. If you have hernia repairs at the same time, there's even more poking and prodding. So you come out of surgery and you know things are inflamed and swollen and sore. And I like to think of it like, you know, if you've got a scratch on your arm, you don't rub anything rough on your arm, on the wound. You know, you want to take care of it. So a really standard thing, a recommendation is also people come out of bariatric surgery on a proton pump inhibitor. Something like pantoprazole, omeprazole, has OLE at the end of the medication, and they lower stomach acid production.
Alcohol? Not alcohol.
No, OLE, not OL. No.
Nice try, Damo.
Yeah. And that lowers stomach acid production because then it's a less acidic environment for your tummy to heal. We're optimising the healing of the tummy, the gut and the bowel without aggravation, without being aggravated. So acid's one thing, but also food. Food has rough bits, especially if we don't swallow well enough. Skins and seeds and things like nuts, well, I'll talk about, you know, all those things. So first priority post-surgery is about fluid intake. I say to my clients, the first 2 weeks is, we're going to work on protein a bit, we're going to build it up, but fluid is the key thing. You are at high risk of dehydration because you cannot chug down fluid intake as easy as you can before surgery. That is why it's sip, sip, sip. I say sunrise to sundown, meaning you have something in your hand the whole time. First goal is to get adequate fluid, and then we start building in food. And we build it in slowly in puree form, which is really like baby food texture. So your surgery centre, your surgeon will have given, there are different guidelines of sometimes there's clear fluid and you move on to full fluid, or it might just be full fluid. I'll talk about the differences in a minute, and I'm going to get to puree. You might have it for 3 days, you might have it for a week, 2 weeks. Different surgery centres and different surgeons have different lengths of time people are on just fluid. And the goal is to build up that fluid. There's no lunch, breakfast or dinner or anything. It's just one long day of sipping. And then there's that time they'll say, okay, you can go on to more of a puree. Some surgery centres will say go straight onto a soft with their own kind of guidelines. But it's not that different. It's different in a way, but it's not that different. So often puree, pureed, mushy might be another term people are given, mushy. And it's really like baby food texture. And yes, Tash, no one says, oh, I want to eat baby food. And I am not a dietitian that says you can just go and get baby food off the shelf. because we want to really focus a bit more on protein. But essentially, if you've had a baby, if you've been exposed to little babies with little gums, no teeth, we're giving them that food that's lovely and gentle. There's nothing rough. We're starting to build up some food going into the gut with nothing that can irritate and scratch and be rough on your little baby tummy. You know, that's people often got a new little tummy. Think about it. It's not only smaller, it's swollen. It's hypersensitive. And because, and I will stop talking in a minute so you can ask questions. I know I'm on a bit of a roll. Because, you know, when you do start in, you're taking such a small amount. And my example is, you know, you scramble an egg, and that's often one of the puree foods that people have on the top of their list. You know, when you're after fluid and they're like, oh my God, I can't wait for an egg. Not everyone. And you have your bit of scrambled egg, and maybe you get through half of it and your tummy says that's enough. And your mind says, surely not. How can that be enough? That's why also we need to keep up the protein drinks for some time. It's not like fluid ends and then food starts and you can eat all your food. But puree, the texture, most of the foods that you want to eat don't come in that texture.
Yeah, it's very, very unfortunate that they don't. I was one of those egg people. I was a hanging out for scrambled egg person. That was me. I had 5 days on clear fluids. Not fun, but obviously necessary, and I was very good and did it all by the book. And then had free fluids, you know, anything that would go up the straw. And then went on to the pureed stage, and I was so excited. And I was so sick after I ate 2 teaspoons of scrambled egg.
Yeah.
How is it possible to be full?
Yes.
From 2 teaspoons of scrambled egg, and then I actually went on a spiral in my mind. I thought, oh my goodness, is this my life now? 2 teaspoons of food, and
I mashed an egg with mayonnaise and just tried to eat it. Oh gosh.
And the emotions come up. And I've got a new client, and he's in the US, and I just spoke to him yesterday, and he's just starting with me, and he's in those very early days of, how am I going to live off this? Is this my life? How am I going to be, you know, what have I done? Yeah. All of that. And just so you know, and this is for people listening, if they're in this, they're coming in, they haven't had surgery yet, it's just not your life forever.
Exactly.
You can, if you tolerate, some people do tolerate half an egg quite comfortably and go, okay, I love that. That was the best egg I've ever tasted in my life. I'm going to have it again for dinner. And I'm going to have it again for breakfast. I call it over-egging, because then next time I see a client or we're talking, they're like, Jane, I never want to see an egg again in my life. I call it, let's not over-egg. Even in puree, we are going super slow. And I'm glad Tash mentioned these teaspoon. It is okay. That didn't go well. We're going to park egg to the side. We're going to start a list of foods tried that make us a little bit upset, or upset in the tummy, or a lot upset. We are going to put them on that list. We're going to leave it 3 or 4 days or a week, and we're going to come back and try a little bit again. Then we're going to have another list, and we're going to have the foods that settle well for us. I had 2 or 3 teaspoons of yogurt, plain yogurt without fruit bits in it, like no strawberry bits or things with seeds, but I had a little bit. That was okay. I'm going to put that on the list of going down okay. And if we start really going through one food at a time and trying different foods, and I've sent through to you guys that, you know, example of that meal plan, and you'll see on that meal plan, because I think you're going to have that to share with your members. There's no amounts on there. There's just nice food combinations of a protein food with a non-protein food. We're not aiming to force food down. We want small bites, chew well. Yes, it's already kind of pre-chewed, but you start that practice of chewing really well, eating really, really slowly. And if the food doesn't settle well, it goes on that list to try a bit later. You might even put the date next to it you last tried it. Because guess what? In 2 weeks' time, your list is going to look so much longer. 2 weeks after that, you know, when you're normally more on the soft food, you'll see how far you've come.
Yeah, 100%.
And it helps that part of you that says, what have I done? How am I going to live? You know, all the emotions. It helps that part say, okay, I'm progressing. And you're never going to stay there. But your tummy is swollen, and I know I'm repeating myself, it is swollen, it is sensitive. That's why we go from puree then to soft, and I call soft the more socially acceptable, because there's a lot of foods that we can go out and eat at a restaurant or eat in front of people that are soft. There's no you can put your fork through soft, but there's not rough bits. There's not lots of skins and seeds and things. It's still very gentle, but you can get an omelette at a cafe or scrambled eggs. You can, eat things, go to work and eat things. People aren't looking and saying, why are you eating baby food texture? You know, you don't feel quite so self-conscious. But we're not launching from puree into full, because softer, moister food is going to go down and settle better.
I think that's good. It takes a lot of the pressure off people to, so often we think, I've got to come up with all these ideas, a standard meal in, when I can only eat such a small amount. And that was something that I was like, I must be doing the wrong thing, I can't get any vegetables in if I'm protein.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't have anyone to talk to about. But then I found out that a lot of dietitians don't understand, because there was no formal ban for that. So I think it gives you a bit of a safety net, having someone to say, hey, look, it's okay.
I actually, so as I said, puree stage was my oh my god, like my yuck stage.
I actually did buy baby food.
Well, what I found, so for me, all I could think about during the 2 weeks of liquid was chewing. I wanted to chew. I just wanted to chew. And when I had the egg and I realized, oh my goodness, it feels really weird. It feels like it's
getting stuck.
Like it's stuck in there, right in the center of my chest. I didn't really comprehend how swollen I was on the inside, but looking back now, yes, of course that does make sense. And I did exactly what she said. I tried it, and I thought, you know what, I will try it again in a few days' time. But what I did differently when I tried it again was I actually put and this sounds crazy, and I don't know why I thought of it, but I put a tiny bit of chicken soup in with it, and it just made it slippery enough that it seemed to go down, and then it was a good egg.
Yep, great. Yep.
And then I nearly did what she said and went egg. It's so predictable. We're so predictable, aren't we?
Well, you've been through pre-op, you've been through this fluid, and we overnight your tummy changes, but your head doesn't, your brain doesn't. And we have I talk a lot about brain hunger and eye hunger and mouth hunger, and we're all of a sudden in the stage of feeling really deprived. You did a great thing, making the food a bit more liquid and moist. Okay, and that is great because we can use pureed vegetables and pureed fruits to add to things, low-fat mayonnaises, low-fat gravies to make things a bit more liquid enough. And and it's also about, there's all these things on my list. You don't have to eat them all. Choose the ones, and we want to just get enough variety to get you through that stage to move on to the soft stage, but enough variety. Choose the foods that you feel, I feel like I could have that in puree form. Other people are like, I'm not going to puree chicken, Jane. That's just gross. That's just not for me. Not a problem. We'll pull that into the soft phase. So it's not like you get a list and you've got to work through everything. Okay? It's choosing the foods, just really trying. I want to come back to something Damo said, because you said some great things there, Damo, was, what we're really looking at when we started puree is really one food at a time. It's not about mixing a lot of foods. It's great to do one food at a time because you realise, or you identify if that food is going to settle well for you. And that mixing and the plate becomes a bit more, balanced over time. But this is a long journey. This is a long game. It's not a short game. And yes, you can feel like you're just eating a lot more protein in the beginning and the medium. And we know that, and we build more vegetables and fruits and whole grains over time. You will not be able to eat all your protein for some time, so many months. That is why you need to drink protein shakes. You need to get from week 3, which is generally around when my clients, are on start puree. That is when I put a structure in. It's when we put eating schedule, practicing the starting drinking, putting some shakes as meals. It takes the pressure off the eating. So many times I've seen people go, I'm not able to eat all my protein. They're forcing food down. Eating past comfort, walking around the house to kind of try and shuffle it down. Eating a bit more, eating over an hour and a half period. We want to take the pressure off the eating by having some good shakes. So common in those really early days. You get to dinner and you think, I have had it. That can be the hardest meal. You're tired, you're a bit behind on fluid, your appetite is at its absolute lowest. Okay, we need a nice, small, cold protein shake for dinner. Sit still, sip it over 20, 30 minutes. We're not skipping a meal, we're not forcing food down. We're getting protein, we're getting fluid. It's going to take some time before everything's rocking along. And your head says, how can I live off this? And I call it a tug of war. You eat a bit and your tummy says, and if people are just listening to your podcast, sorry, they can, you can see, and by putting my hand down kind of lower, about my chest. Your tummy says, I've had enough, and it stops there. Your brain says, surely not. There's this tug of war. It's kind of wanting, really, you're in this kind of, your head, you're thinking, I want to eat more. My mouth wants to eat more. I haven't chewed enough. I want crunch. I'm missing that. I'm not getting my protein. How am I going to get my protein? And it eases over time. But it's really normal. And so you said, Damo, you didn't have someone to say it's really normal. I love, and I talk all about listening to your body from the word go. It's not going to be yelling at you, or it does yell at you, or you've eaten too much because the food starts coming up, or it feels stuck in your chest, feels heavy. We want to listen to the body.
I think it's good because for me, you just said about, we start worrying about how am I going to do this in the long term. And I think we need to realise that these early stages are not long term. They're going to end in a very specific sort of amount of time. We just have to sort of get through it, and we don't need to be putting extra pressure on ourselves by thinking, I still have to get my 5 vegetables in and I have to do all this. We need to throw all that out for the first little while, and let's just concentrate on what's important.
Beautiful. You're taking vitamins, working on fluid and protein, and then around 6 weeks after surgery is when I start, actively bringing in gentle fibre. So people that have had bypasses often, because there's some non-absorption, will go on the looser side. Their bowel function can be on the looser side. But it's really common. After some bypasses, people can get constipated, but after sleeve gastrectomies, it's really common. So we want to make sure there's fluid, but we also want to gently bring in fibre. And fibre is in the fruit, the veg, and the whole grains. So that is a nutrient that's really wonderful to build up over time, but we're not gung-ho on it in those early days. So if you are in those early days and you are struggling with constipation, definitely reach out to your bariatric centre, your bariatric dietitian, or your GP, because I call it not suffering in silence. We need to get things moving until we can build up enough fluid and get fibre into the diet in a not hugely bulky way. You can't eat the same volume of food. So we need to be really strategic on building fibre into the diet. But in those early days, we're not kind of, in those puree and we're moving into soft, we're going to need to use some other things to help if you are constipated. Reach out because it will affect your appetite. If you feel crummy. So it's very common. Okay, I just thought I'd mention the fibre bowel.
That's great, because it's a very common question, isn't it?
Jane, it's extreme. It really is an extremely common question that we see in our
Yeah.
community. But I've been fairly open about just how very disconcerting how my body changed, like specifically around toilet habits and things. I found that very, very disconcerting. I'd always been very regular. I knew nearly down to the minute the time of day when I would need to use the bathroom, and all of that radically and drastically changed, and I felt very uneasy about those changes in that initial 6 to 8 week period. And I didn't reach out to anybody because I was ashamed and embarrassed, and I thought, well, I haven't really seen anything about this, maybe I'm weird and strange, so I just won't say anything. And I actually ended up quite constipated.
Oh, don't feel embarrassed at all. This is everyone listening, to talk to your dietitian. Dietitians talk about poo all the time. And nurses and doctors. It is really common. So as I said, and I'll talk about a few more things. If people have had bypasses, when there's some non-absorption, the tendency is to go a bit looser. So it's really good, one, to know that your number of bowel function or how many times you open your bowels in the day is really normal for you, like normal for the surgery you've had, okay? Because some of the more significant bypasses, such as the SARDS, the SIPs, 2 or 3 times a day to open your bowels is really normal. Bowel movements can be a lot lighter in colour, fluffy, and it's very normal and expected. So it's good to know that. We want to know that. You need to know what's expected and normal, and then if things go outside of that, reaching out for support, because we don't want you opening your bowels 5 times a day and you feeling kind of urgent to get to the toilet. That can be managed. That can be diets looked at and all of that. Okay, so that's on that kind of that side of things, of urgency and people feeling really concerned to go out because they can have a really not a lot of notice when they need to go to the toilet. So that's due to that non-absorption component after bypasses. But on the other side, when we've got a sleeve, gastrectomy, volume goes down, but the bowel hasn't changed, or that the small and large intestine hasn't changed, but volume of food goes down, fibre goes down. So many people before surgery can be very regular and get challenges of going to the toilet. And we can use things. You can go to your pharmacist and use things and get something that helps move things along while we're building up fluid and fibre in the diet. So it's not forever.
Yeah.
Also, in that first kind of week or 2 after surgery, some people can take a good, 4, 5, 6 days to even open their bowels after surgery.
That was me.
Yep. And it can be then very watery. Some people, it's very watery and they're like, I'm having diarrhea. But fluid in, fluid out. It's really normal if your first bowel movements after surgery are very fluid, and because you've had pre-op, you've had that, period of not eating anything before surgery, then you've had surgery. So it's normal for, if there is. And some people say, I've had diarrhea. Let's talk about the number of times you open your bowel and how loose it is. And often it's really just a normal kind of bowel function to have before you start more solid food. And you can go from watery then to constipated. You don't need to go every day to be considered regular after having surgery, or even if you haven't had surgery, as long as you go regularly and you're comfortable.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
people
really good advice.
People can get a new normal. They might say, I go every second or third day, but I've got a skip in my step. Everything's great. There's no issues having, passing my stools. I'm comfortable. Everything's good. Yeah. And it will build in time, because, we're looking at, I kind of say around 2 years post-surgery before you kind of really know where you're settled and everything's into, it can take a lot longer than you think.
Totally agree. We were just speaking with someone earlier today, and they asked how long we felt it took us to find a new normal, just what that normal would eventually feel like. How long did that take? And I said for me it was about 2.5 years.
Yep.
And that might sound like a very long time, but really your body is just going through such a monumental change in so many ways that is just how long it took for me to feel completely settled and okay, I think I vaguely know what's happening now.
Yes, and it's probably hard to hear in some ways if you're new after surgery, but it's really good to hear it and kind of surrender into it. That it's not you get onto a full diet and great, I'm done, and I don't have to think about food so much, and I don't have to work at this. And I think some people. I think we're getting better at getting more discussion around this out there, but it's not, it just takes a lot longer than you think. It's not full diet and I'm done and I don't have to worry about my weight anymore, or it's just all coming off and I just, can be normal again. And I don't like when I'm just, when people say I'm normal again, I'm like, well, everyone's, what's normal, Just being you.
Yeah, that's right. I think those first 6 weeks really it's just such a good time to take a little step back, and I like to liken it to building a house, and we're just laying a really good foundation at the very start.
Yeah.
And then in that first year, really, it's such a great opportunity and an exciting opportunity to be able to take a hold of all of the new information that we're given, definitely availing ourselves of good, solid information from our teams, from our bariatric specialists, from our bariatric dietitians, and arming ourselves with that, but then learning to apply it to our lives. That's the part that takes the time. And for me, that was the part that took the time. The weight coming off, well, my weight was pretty much all off by 14 months post-op. But the learning how to live and how to maintain in the long term, that definitely took far longer for me.
Definitely. So some people, it's rocky from the early, not rocky, but hard. There's stops and starts of weight and all of that. But for, for many people, the weight, the tool of the bariatric surgery does a lot of the heavy lifting and does a lot of, and then the maintenance can be the challenge then for that, person. Like, it can be challenging. And it's because it's behaviour change, Tash. That's what it's creating new habits and changing behaviour, and that takes time, and that's hard as humans. We do what we do, we do so many things by default, and that's that's the reality, is that the emotional the emotional journey and the behaviour change, building habits, is the hard work. And it's the long work, but it's what gets you the best results and also helps you keep them. And a lot of emotions come up for people along the way that surprise them, come out of left field, I call it, and, challenged by a relationship.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I still am surprised by at times the things that will come up, or the associations with certain foods and things like that. It's quite remarkable, really, how our brain seems to hold on to things, and there can be so many memories associated with different traditions and different habits, different things that we've just done habitually, and we don't even really understand why. And when we start unpacking that, that's where the challenges come in.
Yeah, and that's the big hard stuff. Often, when I'm working with clients in the early days or pre-surgery, people are looking way ahead, 6 months' time. I'm going on a holiday. What am I going to eat? Or what am I going to be cooking in 3 months' time? And I say, look, it's great to look ahead, but it's also really great just to take it one day and then 1 week at a time, because it's a bit like having a baby. This is what I relate it to. You think some things are going to be challenging and other things are going to be easy. And you get into, that journey, and what you thought was going to be easy is not so easy. And the things you thought were going to be challenging don't even come up.
Yep.
Like
Yeah,
So it's,
definitely.
for me, it's around expectations and just taking things one step at a time. And yet knowing that it's a long journey. You might know somebody that sailed through the puree stage and loved it, and you are not liking it. It's normal. Everyone has different experiences, and I think that's a really key thing to take away,
I agree.
because lots of people do connect with people they have surgery with on the exact same day, and then there's this comparison, and they can eat egg and I can't eat egg, or they can have this, and everyone's different. So it's just one day, one step at a time.
So, Jane, what should we look for when we're on the puree stage? And if we want to be really adventurous and try some pureed, say, chicken, what sort of consistency and texture are we looking for?
How do
in
we
that?
do that?
How do we actually puree a chicken boob? I know I tried it when I just had surgery, and it was just this lumpy, gritty
Yes.
mess that went into the bin, which I was upset about, because here I am wasting food. How many meals am I going to have to waste before I can actually eat something?
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Down to the let's talk turkey. That's a bad joke, isn't it? But anyway.
No.
So you will
Let's talk
have chicken or turkey. So you will have generally what I hope that you're given a list of foods from your bariatric centre, that you can try in the puree. Some foods come already in that consistency. So it might be yogurt with no fruit bits in there. You can get some kind of high protein custards that could work, Optifast pudding. You can, get scrambled eggs. So some foods are going to come in that consistency. But yes, then we have some other foods that we don't normally eat in that consistency. And we're always going to be aiming to get that food, and I'll talk about the practicalities of how, but we're always aiming to get that food into that consistency that's going to go down and settle. So that is lovely kind of pre-chewed, pureed, moist. Things like chicken. So it's chicken, there's even like chicken breast and leg chicken, and you'll find chicken from the leg a bit more moister than a chicken breast. But you can use like essentially a machine that can puree up, chopping things up quite a lot, pureeing things up. Even you might get chicken mince and cook that, and then you might even mash that up with a fork further. You may mix in some pureed pumpkin or sweet potato, or some low-fat gravy, and you're mashing it up with a fork. So anyone that's had children, and I've said this before, had babies and done that, introducing solids, you are introducing food. You want that consistency to be, if you had no teeth, little gums, it can deal with that food. So it's adding moisture in, using a blender, or using things like the chicken or turkey mince, but putting things in with that, mixing something in with it to make it nice and a good consistency, because chicken breast is inherently very dry. Often red meats are a bit heavy in those early days. Getting a piece of nice fish and pureeing that up, chopping it up a bit, then pureeing it up, mixing in some low-fat gravy, or some, mashed pureed vegetables. We don't want skins and seeds. So the fruits that are going to be on the list are things like banana, blueberries, tinned peaches, tinned apricots. You know how they've got the skins already off. You can drain them. You can mash those up. A bit of maybe mango can be lovely to puree up and put with some chicken. You could mix that in because that's nice and moist. And mango goes really well with chicken. Avocado is wonderful because avocado really makes things nice and soft. So avocado and chicken can be a nice combo. Mango and chicken, fish and mango, or fish and, avocado. Cereals, if you like cereals. So, am I making you hungry, Damo?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I love it. I love the sort of the focus, I guess, and the emphasis that you put on. It doesn't actually have to be like a traditional meat sort of product. We can have a high protein yogurt, or we can have, you know, the tinned fruit.
Yeah, just having some options there is a really good idea. And where do you find that protein powder sits in all of this? Would you encourage people to add things if they can?
Yes, I'll first say something and then I'll get to the protein powder. Great. Look, I don't give my clients how much to eat. I don't say you've got to eat this, you've got to eat that. I actually teach a protein bite ratio. 3 bites of protein food for every 1 bite of other. So it might be 3 bites of chicken to 1 bite of avocado, 3 bites of fish to 1 bite of mango. So when we do it in that way and we have small bites and chew well and eat slowly, we're prioritising protein. We're getting a bit of that other food for flavour and for nutrition, but we're prioritising protein.
Yeah, that's excellent.
So that's kind of how and I don't generally advocate from puree, just eat chicken at a meal or just eat this, because we need some of those other foods. We need some different tastes. But also when I start teaching this, people get to really clear of what are the foods that are really the high protein foods and what are the fruit, the veg, the whole grain. But bits of that are coming in to those meals from at the puree stage. And yes, can we use protein powders? Great. We can use them to make shakes up, but we can add them. So soups can be great because soups are inherently kind of lower in protein unless we add, like lots of nice minced chicken and some puree. You can add some puree chicken or turkey and things like that to some soups. It's great, but we can add in we can add in the high protein powders to fortify. It's called fortifying. I'm on puree. Whey protein isolate powder is what we're looking for. Unflavoured are great, but we want to be careful about adding them into really hot foods or boiling foods because they will denature. And if you've ever added a protein powder into a boiling food or liquid, you will know it will curdle. So that needs to go into warm things. But we can actually fortify milk, add them into milk, blend them into milk, and then add that into, say, a soup that lends itself to be milky. Cereals as well. I love cereals. Cereals are higher in, the fibre and carbohydrates, but what we can do even from puree is, yes, Wheat Bix are a great cereal to have for puree because you let it sit and there's no lumps and bumps and they go lovely and soft. So that is going to qualify for at that puree stage. You just mash it up with a fork, but we can add fortified or high protein milk to cereals.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like that. It just gives people more options.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Rather than just feeling horribly remorseful that they've done this to themselves.
Yeah, and it's not for, and I know we touched on it, it's not forever, and I know, and there's going to be, just if you feel emotions, grief, mourning, it's really normal, and it can be really, people say, why am I teary? And you're teary because, a big part of your life has just changed significantly. It's still going to continue to change, but it's going to get better. But it's actually about also, I talk a lot about journaling with my clients about getting out those emotions and not suppressing them or thinking that it's just them or no one else is feeling this, because it's really, it's very common.
Yep.
Yeah, I felt like I'd lost my best friend.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't eat anything, and because I was having a few issues early on anyway, but because I couldn't eat anything, it was literally felt like there was a death of, my best friend, and learning how to cope again, and when you're in the middle of it, trying to learn new coping strategies is really exhausting.
I agree. I think that we shouldn't underestimate just how we can do a lot of preparation and we can be really prepared, and it's wonderful to listen to podcasts and it's great to be on forums and it's great to read people's experiences, but until we're actually in the situation, we don't know how we will react. I remember very vividly, I was I was 2.5 weeks post-op, so I was just on puree, and my family went out. It was Friday night, and they did takeaway that night, and they came back through the door, and I smelt it before I saw it, and I actually came into my bedroom and cried because I knew I couldn't eat any of it, and it was like a real grief. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to do that again. But very short-sighted, you will be able to enjoy all of those family times again. It's a bit different. It's just done a bit differently and in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. But at the time, it's just emotions are going to come up.
That's right.
And it's really normal. Yeah, it is. It's just really, and it's really challenging. So yeah, it's about getting it out. I'm a big fan of crying it out. When you're journaling, talking to somebody that understands as well, someone else that really understands, and just say it sucks, and it does. But no, it's not forever. And I've heard not so much from Australian centres, but I've heard, say, from US clients, and at their bariatric centre, they're told, some of them will say, you can never eat pizza again. You can never eat this again, takeaway again. You're never going to have a cookie again, ice cream again. And I'm like, that one is not true. And if that is there as a kind of a deeper, the back of your mind, what you've been told, that grief's kind of even more. And that feeling of, is my life, I've lost a friend, and how am I going to live like this is even more. So I really talk a lot about that and combat that way of thinking, because that's just not reality. And but that does get spoken about. I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah.
Something that I wanted to ask you, and it reminded me when you mentioned soup. There's something that a lot of our members they come and ask, and you always come up with these questions when you sort of don't have that access to your dietitian to ask her, and one of the things is having soup. Can you have, or do the rules apply around having like a glass of water?
Yeah.
And
can I drink with my soup, like with my liquid diet? When I'm on liquids, can I drink, or should I still separate, by half an hour, my fluid consumption and then my nourishing fluid consumption?
So when my clients are on fluid, it is fluid. It's all about getting adequate fluid, because you're at high risk of being dehydrated and going back into hospital and needing a drip. And because, often people will take an hour to get through a cup of fluid. So when you're on the fluid stage, I say one long day of sipping, no breakfast, lunch and dinner, stopping and starting. It is sip, 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 drink, 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 drink. We are aiming to get about one. Generally the goal is, and I give the goal, and I've heard other surgeons give, it's not other because I'm not a surgeon, but surgeons give the goal of aiming for 1.5 litres of fluid is a good kind of ballpark to be aiming for. And you generally are not leaving the hospital on that, but we want to be working towards that. When we move from fluid to puree, that's when I put the schedule of eating in. That's when we stop drinking before and we wait for a period after. And so if you're having fortified soup for a meal, or if you're having a high protein shake, not drinking on either side. We're really practicing that stopping and starting, and we're treating that high protein shake or the soup like a meal.
Excellent. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Because it's just not talked about enough, I don't think. Probably because it's a small topic and it kind of gets forgotten about.
But it causes confusion because, it's mushy. Does it really matter? Well, it needs time to do its work, doesn't it, before we go washing it away?
Yes, exactly. And it's really normal for when you move from fluid stage to a puree stage and you go into that schedule, for fluid intake to take a bit of a drop, because you've gone from sip, sip, sip all day long to, okay, now I've got to stop and start and find that rhythm of your eating.
I find that quite hard.
Yes. And for some people are very scheduled and their job's scheduled and that's them, it's okay and they, get the hang of it fairly soon, but it can take some time. I call it a rhythm, and we need to find a schedule that really suits you and your job and your life, and do reminders, because you need a schedule not only to not drink on either side of meals, but also then know when you can start drinking. So you have these nice little chunks of time during the day when you're like, okay, I've got an hour and a half, I need to get through this amount of fluid, I need to sip, sip, sip. So we're chipping away at your fluid intake and your protein intake over the day.
Perfect.
Jane, one of the other things that I wanted to ask you is when, and I mean, I did it when I was, about 6 months post-op. I wouldn't eat a meal sort of unless I was getting some sort of hunger feelings. And there was times where I could have gone, 2 days without actually having any food. And we have people that have asked this question, what if I'm not feeling like eating? My sort of response now is that I would have a schedule and have something anyway, just to create that habit. But I'm just sort of wondering what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, okay, and that's a really great question. So the tool of bariatric surgery, we've got restriction, but we've also got the metabolic and changing with the hunger and fullness hormones, and that's a lovely thing because your appetite drops. But I talk to my client really from week 3, we are starting to practice or relearn listening to the body cues. Now, can they be easy to identify? No. I say, your body can be whispering to you. It may be some time before you even hear that whisper, or your body can be talking in a different language. So before surgery, you heard it, you knew what it felt like to be hungry. But after surgery, it can be very, very subtle, and it can also take time and practice to even identify your hunger and fullness cues.
Yep.
So we start practicing that. We start relearning, because as babies will eat until they've had enough and then push the spoon away. So we have that, but we lose it over time because we eat with our eyes, we eat on the clock, we eat with our mouth, we mouth hunger, we overeat, we forget to listen to the hunger and fullness cues. Eating when we're hungry, stopping when we're satisfied. But those cues do increase in time, but we start practicing from the early days. Damo, do we need to have a schedule and eat on schedule? Yes, we do. But it's very normal to be able to eat some days more than others.
Yeah.
So we want to eat in a schedule. We want to have small bites. We want to chew really well, and we want to eat slowly. And we want to stop when we're satisfied at that point, at that meal on that day. And really, example is you can dish yourself up 2 exact meals and have them at lunch 2 days in a row. One day you'll eat that amount comfortably. The next day you get through 2/3, your body says, I've had enough. I want my clients to listen to that. I want you to listen to that. Your body is saying, I've had enough for that meal on that day. Now, if you are a bit behind on your protein and you're running a bit low, that's when, those early days, medium days, we leverage high protein shakes, and we really focus on kind of getting protein in a smaller volume.
Yep.
In time, you're going to be able to eat more. It all evens out, but that practice of listening to the body and finding that point of that, being able to identify what satisfied feels like, is a wonderful practice. It's hard because your body's going to tell you when you've eaten enough, and then when you register, I've eaten enough, but I still want to eat, we go into that work. That work is, what else am I hungry for?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That is exactly the process. When I was talking earlier about the habits that come after and the changing of all of that, that is exactly what I was referring to. For me, that I really don't think I ever understood, probably from I would say early teens, just trauma related things. I really think that I just did not listen to my body at all. So I did not understand my hunger cues. I did not understand what my full cues were at all. I deliberately did not listen to my body. And learning to do that as someone in their 40s was very, very challenging in a lot of ways, triggering in a lot of ways at times as well. But it's become so rewarding, and I now can just say, hey, no, I'm definitely full. And there are still days where I am full or I cannot eat more, and I will go to the protein shake or whatever just to top up that protein. It's just become something that that is a non-negotiable, to actually listen. And I think that it's life-changing. So yeah, very, very, very much in agreement with that.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's also why I don't specify amounts of food, because everyone's different. Anatomies are different. People can eat different amounts. So there's not, a set amount. Obviously, we need to eat and drink a certain amount of protein to reach a protein goal. But different people can get to their protein goal kind of faster or eat more of their food at different points. Everyone's quite different. Even the same surgeon will do different kind of size sleeves on their patients. They might use the same bougie, for example, the kind of it's like a hose pipe that goes down. And sometimes they might do it even a bit tighter on some of their patients than others. So you can't say, you've had a sleeve, well, you can eat this amount and you can eat that amount. Everyone is different. And there's a lot of emotions that come up with that listening to the body, and there can be a lot of history there, as you alluded to. It can be really scary to feel hungry, to register feeling hungry. It can feel very safe when you feel full, because there might have been food scarcity in your past. But that is what's going to, I call it respect the sleeve and listening to the body. There's a lot under there. It's a lot of practice. It is not perfection from week 3 or from the beginning. Your body is, it might take a while to even hear that first little whisper. But that's why we say eat slow, eat in a quiet place, ideally, without distraction, and listening. And it can be, the little pain, not little twitch around the shoulder, or the runny nose, or the sneeze, or that feeling of just my cells don't feel as empty anymore, or I just feel something around the middle. But it's not necessarily what we think hunger or fullness or satisfied would feel like, or what it felt like even if you did register hunger and fullness cues pre-surgery. It can be quite different.
Yeah, totally agree.
Love it. Jane, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't believe we're at an hour of recorded time. It's gone so quick.
It really did.
So we really appreciate your time, and we're going to include
all the resources
and your Instagram, so that people can follow you and get those amazing tips and tricks that you talk about on your reels. And for people that are in Western Australia looking for a dietitian, do you have space on your books for new patients?
Yes. Well, actually, Damo, I work solely online, and I have clients all over the world. So you don't have to live, you can be on a farm in Queensland.
Brilliant.
You can be, anywhere in the world. I've got clients all over the world in, different time zones. So, reach out on Bariatric Nutrition Coach on Instagram. Slide into my DMs and say hello, and we can chat. So that'd be lovely.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for having me on. It's been wonderful to chat with you both. You both do an amazing job of supporting the bariatric community in Australia. And I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you
Jane.
much.
We're looking
You're
forward
welcome.
to more of this in the future.
Thanks so much. Bye for now.